The metal doors of the High Council chamber slid open with a soft hiss. Dr. Kethvar walked through them with careful steps, his forearms carrying a data tablet, while his scaled head held high with pride. Behind him, 2 guards pushed a hovering containment pod into the vast circular room. The High Council of the Zephyrian Research Collective sat in their elevated seats, their large black eyes focused on the new arrival. Each council member represented thousands of years of scientific achievement. They had studied and cataloged over 10,000 different species across the galaxy. Today, Kethvar believed he was bringing them something special. "Honored Council," Kethvar began, his voice echoing in the chamber, "I present to you specimen designation ZRC-7731, a previously unknown species from the Outer Rim territories." The containment pod hummed softly as it settled in the center of the room. Through its transparent walls, the council members could see a bipedal creature, with pale skin and dark hair. The being appeared to be sleeping, though sensors showed it was very much alive and aware. Council Leader Vexthul leaned forward, her ancient eyes studying the creature. "Tell us what you know about this species, Dr. Kethvar." Kethvar activated his data tablet, and holographic displays filled the air around the pod. The specimen was captured from a small exploration vessel that entered our monitoring zone 3 cycles ago. The ship's technology was crude but functional. Basic fusion drives, simple computer systems, and weapons that rely on chemical propellants. Several council members made sounds of amusement. Chemical weapons were something their civilization had abandoned over 50,000 years ago. "The species calls itself human," Kethvar continued. "They appear to be from a world they call Earth, located in a spiral arm we have not yet fully explored. Initial scans suggest they have only recently achieved interstellar travel." Inside the pod, Sarah Chen kept her breathing steady and her eyes closed. She had been awake for the past 2 hours, listening to every word. The translation device they had implanted behind her ear was working perfectly. Though they did not know, she was already beginning to understand their language patterns. Sarah was a military engineer, trained to think quickly and adapt to any situation. When her exploration ship had been disabled by an energy weapon she had never seen before, she knew she was in serious trouble. When strange beings in environmental suits had boarded her ship and taken her captive, she realized she might be the first human to make contact with an alien civilization. That realization came with a heavy responsibility. Everything she learned here could be vital information for Earth's defense. So she watched, listened, and remembered everything. "What are its physical capabilities?" asked Council Member Thisera, her tentacles twitching with scientific curiosity. Kethvar pulled up more data. "Preliminary scans show it is remarkably average by galactic standards. Moderate strength, adequate reflexes, limited sensory range. Its brain structure is interesting, though. Large frontal cortex, complex neural pathways. I believe it may possess above-average problem-solving abilities." "Any signs of psychic or energy manipulation capabilities?" Vexthul asked, none detected. "This appears to be a purely biological species with no enhanced abilities. Quite primitive, really." Sarah fought the urge to smile. If they thought humans were primitive, they were in for some surprises. She had already noted several things about her captors that they probably did not realize. Their environmental suits had an obvious weak point at the neck joint. Their energy weapons had a charging cycle that lasted approximately 3 seconds, and most importantly, they seemed to think that primitive meant harmless. "I recommend we proceed with full testing protocols," Kethvar said. "This species could provide valuable insights into early-stage technological development. We might also determine if they would be suitable for integration into our labor systems." Sarah's blood went cold. Labor systems. They were not just studying her out of scientific curiosity. They were evaluating humans as potential slaves. The council members discussed among themselves in their complex language, but Sarah was already picking up key phrases. They spoke about resource extraction, population management, and control methods. It became clear that the Zephyrians had done this before with other species. "Very well," Vexthul finally announced. "Begin the testing sequence. We want comprehensive data on cognitive abilities, physical limitations, and psychological responses. How long do you estimate the process will take?" "No more than 20 cycles, honored leader. I have prepared a series of increasingly complex challenges that should map the full range of this creature's capabilities." As the guards prepared to move her pod to the testing facility, Sarah made mental notes of everything she could see. The chamber had 12 exits, each guarded by a single sentry. The council members wore no visible weapons, suggesting they relied entirely on their guards for protection. The room's design showed that the Zephyrians valued ceremony and hierarchy. More importantly, she had counted the number of guards, noted their equipment, and observed their behavior patterns. They moved with the confidence of beings who had never faced a real threat. That confidence might become a weakness she could exploit. The testing facility was a massive complex filled with chambers designed to evaluate every aspect of a subject's abilities. As her pod was connected to various monitoring systems, Sarah pretended to slowly wake up. She opened her eyes gradually, as if still groggy from whatever they had used to keep her unconscious. Dr. Kethvar stood outside her pod, studying readings on a control panel. Fascinating. Brain activity is increasing rapidly, much faster recovery than predicted. Sarah looked around with an expression of confusion and fear that was only partly fake. The fear was real, but not for the reasons they thought. She was afraid for her species, afraid of what these beings might do to human colonies if they decided humans were worth conquering. "Can you understand me?" Kethvar asked through the pod's communication system. Sarah nodded slowly, then spoke in English. "Where am I?" "What do you want with me?" The translation device converted her words instantly. Kethvar made pleased sounds as he recorded her response. "Excellent. Language centers are functioning properly. The implant integration was successful. The specimen appears to be experiencing normal confusion and fear responses," Kethvar told his assistants. "Begin preparation for the first series of tests. We will start with basic physical coordination, then move to simple problem-solving exercises." As they prepared their first test, Sarah was already planning. She would play along with their experiments, but every moment would be spent gathering intelligence. She needed to learn about their technology, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their intentions toward humanity. They thought they had captured a primitive specimen for study. They had no idea they had just brought a highly trained military engineer into the heart of their research facility, an engineer who was already planning how to turn their own tools against them. The Zephyrians believed they were beginning an experiment. Sarah knew they had just started a war. They simply did not know it yet. The testing chamber hummed with activity as Dr. Kethvar prepared the first series of evaluations. Sarah stood in the center of a circular room, surrounded by various pieces of equipment that would measure everything from her reaction time to her problem-solving abilities. She wore a simple gray jumpsuit that the Zephyrians had provided, along with multiple sensors attached to her body. "We will begin with basic physical assessments," Kethvar announced to his team of researchers. "Please note all readings carefully. This data will establish baseline parameters for the human species." The first test was simple strength measurement. A mechanical arm extended from the wall, and Sarah was instructed to grip it and pull as hard as she could. She complied, exerting what she considered moderate effort. The readings appeared on Kethvar's display, and he made notes with obvious disappointment. "Strength levels are well below galactic average," he observed. "Approximately 40% of standard Zephyrian capability. This species would not be suitable for heavy labor tasks." Sarah almost smiled. She had deliberately held back, not wanting to reveal her full capabilities on the first day. Her military training had taught her the value of being underestimated. Let them think humans were weak. That would make their eventual surprise all the more complete. The next test measured her reflexes. Lights flashed randomly around the room, and she was told to touch each one as quickly as possible. Again, she performed adequately but not exceptionally, missing a few lights on purpose to sell the deception. "Reaction times are within expected parameters for a biological species," Kethvar noted. "Nothing remarkable, but it was the cognitive tests where things began to get interesting." The first challenge was a maze projected onto the floor in hard light. The objective was simple: find the exit. Most species approached this methodically, testing different paths until they found the correct route. Sarah looked at the maze for exactly 30 seconds, then walked straight through the walls. The holographic barriers offered no physical resistance, and she had quickly realized they were only light projections. While other species had spent hours navigating the intended paths, she had simply ignored them entirely. "Interesting," Kethvar murmured. "The specimen appears to have bypassed our intended methodology. Should we count this as a failure?" One of his assistants asked. No, recorded as a completion. Time 37 seconds. Method unconventional. The next puzzle was a physical one. A box made of crystalline material sat on a pedestal, and Sarah was told it contained something she needed to retrieve. The intended solution involved manipulating hidden panels and pressure points in a specific sequence that could take hours to discover. Sarah examined the box carefully, running her hands over its surface and testing its weight. The material was hard but not unbreakable. She noted stress points where the crystal structure seemed thinner. Then she picked up the box and slammed it against the corner of the pedestal. The crystal shattered, revealing a small metal sphere inside. Task completed, she announced calmly. The research team stared in stunned silence. Kethvar's data tablet showed completion time, 43 seconds. Expected time, 2 to 4 hours. The specimen has again bypassed our intended solution path, Kethvar observed. It appears to favor direct approaches over sophisticated problem solving. What he did not understand was that Sarah was applying military thinking to their tests. In combat, elegant solutions were often inferior to effective ones. Why spend hours on a puzzle when direct action could achieve the same result in seconds? But while she was solving their tests with deliberate simplicity, Sarah was also learning. She had memorized the layout of the testing chamber, noted the locations of all security cameras, and observed the behavior patterns of the guards. She counted 23 different monitoring devices in the room and identified 12 possible exit points. More importantly, she was studying her captors. The Zephyrians moved with the slow precision of beings who had never needed to hurry. Their technology was advanced but appeared to rely heavily on automation. She had not seen a single weapon that required manual operation. Everything was controlled by computer systems. That gave her ideas. The language test came next. Kethvar spoke to her in Zephyrian, using simple phrases and watching to see how quickly she could learn basic communication. What he did not know was that Sarah had been studying their language since the moment she woke up in the council chamber. She pretended to struggle with the pronunciation while secretly analyzing grammatical structures and memorizing vocabulary. When Kethvar asked her to repeat a phrase about food, she deliberately mispronounced 2 words while correctly understanding the entire sentence. Language acquisition appears normal, Kethvar noted, perhaps slightly faster than average, but nothing exceptional. During her rest period, Sarah was kept in a small cell with transparent walls. The guards changed shifts every 6 hours, and she quickly learned their individual routines. Guard Unit 7 always checked his equipment exactly 3 times during each shift. Guard Unit 12 had a habit of standing with her back to the cell while reading reports on her tablet. More concerning were the conversations she overheard. The guards spoke casually about previous subjects, mentioning species she had never heard of. Some had been integrated into Zephyrian society as workers. Others had been deemed unsuitable and were apparently no longer a concern. Sarah did not want to think too hard about what no longer a concern might mean. On the 3rd day, they gave her what they called a survival scenario. She was placed in a chamber designed to simulate a hostile environment, with limited resources and multiple challenges to overcome. The goal was to survive for as long as possible, while the researchers monitored her stress responses and decision-making processes. The chamber contained broken equipment, scattered supplies, and environmental hazards like heat sources and electrical barriers. Most subjects tried to create a safe shelter and rationed their resources carefully. Sarah had a different approach. She immediately began dismantling the broken equipment, identifying useful components and improvising tools. Within 2 hours, she had constructed a simple but effective signaling device from spare parts. By the end of the day, she had created water purification systems, improvised weapons, and had begun mapping what she suspected were weak points in the chamber's structure. Remarkable adaptability, Kethvar observed. This species demonstrates unusual creativity and resource utilization. Is that significant? Asked his assistant. Perhaps. Most species follow predictable patterns when faced with survival scenarios. This one seems to be improvising solutions we have never seen before. What Kethvar did not realize was that he was watching a military engineer at work. Sarah's training had taught her to see potential in everything around her. A broken power coupling could become part of a radio. A damaged environmental suit could provide materials for tools. Every piece of debris was a resource waiting to be used. As the days passed, the test grew more complex, but Sarah's approach remained consistent. She solved problems quickly and efficiently, often ignoring the intended solutions in favor of more direct methods. To the Zephyrians, this looked like primitive thinking. To Sarah, it was simply practical, but she was also gathering more intelligence. She had learned that the research facility was connected to a larger network that included military installations and communication arrays. The guards sometimes discussed other research projects, and Sarah was beginning to understand that the Zephyrian collective was much larger and more dangerous than she had initially thought. They were not just studying individual species. They were evaluating entire civilizations for potential conquest or exploitation, and from what she could tell, humanity was currently being classified as a candidate for both. That made her current mission clear. She needed to escape, but more than that, she needed to get word back to Earth. Humanity had to know about this threat before it was too late. The Zephyrians thought they were conducting routine experiments on a primitive specimen. They had no idea that their test subject was actually conducting reconnaissance on them. Dr. Kethvar stood before the High Council once again, but this time his confidence had been replaced by frustration. The holographic displays around him showed data from 2 weeks of testing, and the results were not what he had expected. The specimen continues to solve our challenges through what can only be described as brute force methods, he reported. While effective, these approaches demonstrate a lack of sophistication that is troubling for our research goals. Council leader Vex Thule studied the data with her ancient eyes. Explain these completion times. Some of your tests were solved in minutes rather than the projected hours. Yes, honored leader, but the methods used were crude. When faced with a complex navigation puzzle, the specimen simply broke through barriers rather than finding the intended path. When given a resource management scenario, it dismantled equipment to create tools we never intended. It shows a concerning disregard for proper procedures. What Kethvar did not understand was that Sarah was listening to every word through the facility's communication system. She had spent the past week learning how to access their internal networks through the maintenance panels in her cell. The Zephyrians' overconfidence in their security was becoming a major advantage. Perhaps, suggested Council Member Thyssera, we need a more comprehensive evaluation, something that will push this creature to its absolute limits. Vexthul nodded slowly. Prepare the Advanced Survival Complex. If this species is truly as primitive as it appears, a proper challenge should reveal its limitations clearly. Kethvar's expression brightened. The Advanced Survival Complex was their most sophisticated testing environment, designed to break down subjects completely before evaluating how they rebuilt themselves. No species had ever completed it successfully on the first attempt. An excellent suggestion, honored leader. I will begin preparations immediately. 3 days later, Sarah found herself standing before the entrance to what looked like a massive underground facility. The Zephyrians had explained that this would be her final test, a comprehensive evaluation that would determine her species' overall potential. You will have access to basic supplies, Kethvar explained through the communication system, food, water, and standard tools. The objective is simple. Reach the exit on the lowest level. You have 10 days. What he did not mention were the automated defense systems, environmental hazards, and resource scarcity built into every level. The facility was designed to simulate the worst possible survival conditions while monitoring every aspect of a subject's response to extreme stress. Sarah entered the complex with the small pack of supplies they had given her. The entrance sealed behind her with a heavy mechanical sound that echoed through the corridors. She was alone in a maze of metal and machinery, but for the first time since her capture, she felt truly free. The first level appeared to be a standard industrial environment with corridors, storage rooms, and basic facilities. Sarah began her exploration methodically, but she was not looking for the exit. She was looking for weaknesses. Within an hour, she had located the primary power conduits, identified the placement of security cameras, and found the central ventilation system. More importantly, she had discovered that many of the decorative panels were actually access points to the facility's internal systems. The Zephyrians watched from their monitoring station as Sarah moved through the first level. Her approach was careful and methodical, which matched their expectations. Most subjects spent the first day simply trying to understand their environment, but Sarah was not most subjects. By the end of the first day, she had done much more than explore. She had begun to systematically disable the monitoring systems on the first level, not by destroying them, but by carefully rerouting their power sources. To the observers, it looked like random equipment failures. The second level introduced the first real challenges. Automated defense turrets emerged from hidden compartments, firing stunning energy bolts at anything that moved. Most subjects either found safe paths around these defenses or endured the stunning effects while searching for the exit. Sarah took a different approach. She studied the turret's firing patterns for exactly 20 minutes, then began dismantling light fixtures and ventilation grates. Within 3 hours, she had constructed improvised shields from metal plating and created simple but effective weapons from maintenance tools. Then she went hunting. The monitoring station erupted in surprised chatter as their displays showed Sarah systematically destroying every defense turret on the second level. She moved with the precision of someone who understood both tactics and technology, using her improvised weapons to disable the turret's power sources rather than simply trying to destroy them. "This is highly irregular," Kethvar observed. "The specimen appears to be treating this as a combat scenario rather than a survival test. Perhaps that is how its species naturally responds to threats," suggested one of his assistants. What they did not understand was that Sarah was applying military doctrine to their test. In her mind, this was not a survival scenario. This was enemy territory, and her objective was not just to escape, but to gather intelligence and cause maximum damage to enemy capabilities. The third level presented environmental hazards, extreme temperatures, toxic gases, and unstable flooring that could collapse without warning. The intended challenge was to navigate these dangers while conserving resources and maintaining physical health. Sarah's approach was characteristically direct. She used components from the disabled defense turrets to create environmental suits and detection equipment. When she encountered unstable flooring, she did not try to cross it carefully. Instead, she deliberately triggered the collapses while standing at safe distances, mapping the stable pathways through controlled destruction. By the fourth day, she had reached the fifth level, moving faster than any previous test subject. But she was not just progressing through the facility. She was learning its secrets. The central computer core was located on level 7, and Sarah had been working toward it since the beginning. Every piece of equipment she dismantled taught her more about Zephyrian technology. Every security system she bypassed revealed more about their methods and weaknesses. The Zephyrians thought they were pushing her to her limits. Actually, they were giving her a complete education in their most advanced systems. On level 6, she encountered something that made her blood run cold. A storage area filled with personal belongings from other test subjects. Clothing, tools, and artifacts from dozens of different species. Some of the items looked very old, suggesting that the Zephyrians had been conducting these tests for many years. More disturbing was what she did not find. No signs that any of these subjects had ever left the facility. That night, as she rested in a shelter she had constructed from salvaged materials, Sarah made a decision. She was not just going to escape this facility. She was going to make sure it never trapped anyone else. Level 7 contained the central computer core, just as she had suspected. The Zephyrians probably thought it was safely protected behind multiple layers of security and environmental hazards. They were wrong. Sarah had spent 2 weeks learning their technology, understanding their systems, and preparing for this moment. The improvised tools she carried were not random salvage. They were carefully designed components that could interface with Zephyrian computer systems. As she began working on accessing the central core, alarms started sounding throughout the facility. The Zephyrians had finally realized that their test subject was not just trying to escape. She was attempting to hack into their most secure systems. "Impossible," Kethvar whispered as he watched the security displays. "The specimen is attempting to access our primary data core. How could it even know such a thing exists?" Emergency response teams were dispatched to the facility, but Sarah had prepared for that too. The improvised weapons she had created were not just for defense turrets. Some of them were much more dangerous. As Zephyrian security forces entered the facility, they discovered that their primitive test subject had turned their own advanced testing complex into a trap, designed specifically for them. The Zephyrians had thought they were conducting their most comprehensive evaluation of human capabilities. Instead, They had given a military engineer access to their most sensitive facility and 2 weeks to prepare for war. They were about to learn the difference between primitive and harmless. The central computer core of the advanced survival complex hummed with activity as Sarah's improvised interface connected to the Zephyrian network. Sparks flew from damaged conduits where she had rerouted power systems, and emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the chamber. She had exactly 17 minutes before the security teams reached level 7. Her fingers moved quickly across the makeshift control panel she had constructed from salvaged components. The Zephyrian computer language was complex, but 2 weeks of careful observation had taught her the basic command structures. More importantly, she understood how their security systems thought. The first firewall fell within 3 minutes. Sarah had learned that Zephyrian programmers relied heavily on automated defenses, assuming that no primitive species could possibly understand their technology well enough to mount a serious attack. That assumption was about to cost them dearly. As data flowed across her improvised display, Sarah's expression grew darker with each file she accessed. The Zephyrians had not just been studying her. They had been studying humanity for much longer than she had realized. Detailed surveillance reports filled the screen. Human colonies on 17 different worlds. Population estimates, resource assessments, and technological evaluations. The Zephyrians had been watching human expansion into space for over 30 years, carefully cataloging every settlement and analyzing their defensive capabilities. But that was not the worst. Part Sarah found files labeled Integration Protocols and Labor Classification Systems. The documents contained detailed plans for the conquest and enslavement of human space, specific strategies for attacking individual colonies, methods for breaking human resistance, and protocols for managing human workers in Zephyrian facilities. According to the files, humanity had been classified as suitable for integration 6 months ago. The only thing that had delayed the invasion was the need for more detailed intelligence about human psychology and combat capabilities. That was why they had captured her. Sarah was not just a random test subject. She was a final intelligence-gathering operation before the Zephyrians launched their attack on human space. The sound of approaching boots echoed through the corridors outside. Sarah's time was running out, but she had found something even more valuable than intelligence about Zephyrian invasion plans. She had found their entire strategic database: military installations, supply routes, communication networks, and defensive capabilities across the entire Zephyrian collective. Fleet compositions, weapon specifications, and detailed analysis of their own weaknesses. Everything that Earth's military would need to mount an effective defense. Sarah began uploading the data to a hidden transmitter she had constructed from components throughout the facility. The signal would be weak, but it should be strong enough to reach the communication relay she had hidden in the wreckage of her original ship. From there, it would bounce through several automated systems before finally reaching Earth. The upload progress crawled across her display: 15%, 23%, 37%. Each percentage point represented thousands of files that could save human lives. Not explosions echoed through the facility as the Zephyrian security teams encountered the improvised weapons Sarah had placed throughout the upper levels. She had turned their own testing equipment into an elaborate trap, using their automated systems against them. Motion sensors that triggered explosive charges, environmental controls that released toxic gases in sealed corridors, defense turrets that she had reprogrammed to target Zephyrian energy signatures. The facility's communication system crackled to life. "Attention test subject. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Continued resistance will result in termination." Sarah ignored the transmission and continued working. The upload had reached 62%, but she needed more time. The security teams would reach level 7 within minutes. She activated another part of her plan. Throughout the facility, hidden charges began detonating in carefully planned sequences, not random destruction, but precise strikes against key structural supports. The entire complex began to shake as upper levels collapsed in controlled demolitions. "What is happening?" Dr. Kethvar demanded from the monitoring station. "The facility is destroying itself." His assistants frantically checked their instruments. "Sir, the specimen appears to have gained access to all facility systems. It has triggered emergency demolition protocols." "That is impossible." "Those protocols require authorization from the High Council." But Sarah had learned that Zephyrian security was designed to keep people out, not to prevent someone who was already inside from causing damage. Once she had gained access to the central computer, their own systems had become her weapons. The upload reached 85%. Sarah could hear the security teams cutting through the blast doors on level 6. They would reach her position within minutes, but she was not planning to be there when they arrived. She had discovered something interesting about the facility's design. The central computer core was connected to the main power grid for the entire research complex. If she overloaded the core, the resulting feedback would cascade through the entire network, potentially damaging systems across multiple facilities. Sarah began implementing what she privately called the goodbye gift, a carefully crafted virus that would spread through the Zephyrian research network, corrupting data and destroying files related to their invasion plans. It would not cripple their entire civilization, but it would set back their intelligence operations by years. The upload reached 94% when the blast doors to level 7 finally gave way. Zephyrian security forces poured into the chamber, their energy weapons raised and ready to fire. They found Sarah standing calmly beside the central computer core, her hands raised in apparent surrender. The improvised interface was still connected to the system, data flowing across its displays in streams of alien text. "Step away from the computer terminal," the security team leader commanded. Sarah smiled. Too late. The upload hit 100% at the same moment that her virus activated. Across the facility, computer systems began failing in cascading waves of corruption. Emergency power failed, life support systems shut down, and security protocols collapsed. But Sarah was not finished. She had one more message to send. Using the facility's emergency communication array, she transmitted a signal directly to the High Council. When the connection established, she spoke in perfect Zephyrian, her accent flawless after weeks of careful study. "High Council of the Zephyrian Research Collective. This is Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Defense Force. You have made a serious mistake." The transmission was being recorded throughout the facility, broadcast on every communication channel. Every Zephyrian in the complex could hear her words. "For the past month you have held me captive while planning an invasion of human space. You believed that studying one human would give you the intelligence needed to conquer my species. You were wrong." Sarah gestured to the chaos around her, the sparking computers and failing systems. "Instead, you have given me complete access to your military databases, your strategic plans, and your technological specifications. All of this information is now on its way to Earth." The security team leader raised his weapon, but Sarah was not finished. "You classified humanity as suitable for integration because you believed we were primitive and harmless. You thought our technology was crude and our capabilities limited. Let me correct that misunderstanding." She pressed a final control on her improvised interface. Throughout the facility, the remaining defense systems activated simultaneously, but they had been reprogrammed. Instead of protecting the complex, they began systematically destroying everything inside it. Humans do not surrender. We do not integrate, and we do not forgive threats to our people. Consider this your only warning. The transmission ended as Sarah triggered the final phase of her plan. The central computer core began to overload, energy building toward a feedback explosion that would destroy the entire facility and send destructive pulses through the connected network. As alarms blared and emergency systems failed throughout the complex, Sarah faced the security team with calm determination. She had accomplished her mission. Earth would be warned. The Zephyrian invasion plans were corrupted, and their most advanced research facility would be reduced to rubble. The Zephyrians had captured what they thought was a primitive specimen for study. Instead, they had given a human military engineer everything she needed to declare war on behalf of her entire species. They had called it an experiment. She had called it a proclamation of war. The explosion that destroyed the advanced survival complex could be seen from orbit. Dr. Kethvar watched through the viewport of his emergency transport as a column of fire erupted from the research facility, sending debris high into the atmosphere. The shockwave that followed shattered windows in buildings 50 kilometers away. "How is this possible?" he whispered, his forearms trembling as he gripped the safety rail. She was just one primitive specimen. The pilot of the transport turned to face him, her expression grim. "Sir, we are receiving reports from across the sector. Multiple research facilities are reporting system failures and data corruption. The virus has spread through our entire network. Below them, the ruins of what had been the collective's most advanced testing facility continued to burn. Somewhere in that wreckage was the body of a human female, who had just dealt a devastating blow to one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. But Sarah Chen was not dead. As the explosion had torn through Level 7, she had done what humans do best in impossible situations. She had adapted. The blast doors that the security team had cut through provided just enough shelter to protect her from the worst of the explosion. The environmental suit she had improvised from salvaged materials kept her alive when the facility's atmosphere vented into space. When the rescue teams finally reached the ruins 3 days later, they found her unconscious but alive in a pocket of debris that should have been impossible to survive. The Zephyrians who discovered her could not understand how any being could have lived through such destruction. They also did not understand that surviving the explosion had never been part of Sarah's plan. She had been prepared to die to protect her species. The fact that she lived was just a bonus that would let her see the results of her work. The High Council chamber was in chaos when they brought her before them again. This time Sarah was not in a containment pod. She stood freely in the center of the room, flanked by guards but not restrained. The Zephyrians had learned to treat her with considerably more respect. Council leader Vexthol looked older than before. Her ancient eyes filled with something that might have been fear. Around the chamber, holographic displays showed the extent of the damage Sarah had caused. 17 research facilities offline. Military databases corrupted. Communication networks compromised. And at the center of it all, a single human who had turned their own systems against them. "You have caused considerable damage to our operations," Vexthul said, her voice carefully controlled. Sarah met her gaze without flinching. "Good. You threatened my people. I responded appropriately." One being against an entire civilization. How did you think this could end well for you? It already has ended well for me. By now, Earth knows everything about your planned invasion. They know about your military capabilities, your strategic weaknesses, and your technological limitations. Most importantly, they know you exist. Dr. Kethvar stepped forward from where he had been standing with the other researchers. His scientific curiosity had overcome his fear, even after everything that had happened. Impossible. Our communication networks monitored all transmissions from the facility. No signals reached human space. Sarah smiled, and something in that expression made several council members step backward. You monitored all transmissions from your facility. You did not monitor the transmissions from my ship. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Council Member Thisra spoke. Your ship was destroyed when we captured you. The main vessel was disabled. But humans do not put all our important systems in one place. The emergency beacon I ejected before capture had enough power to receive a transmission and relay it through several automated networks. Your intelligence about human technology was not as complete as you thought. Vexthul's expression darkened. If this is true, then you have doomed your species to a war they cannot win. We will simply accelerate our invasion timeline. Go ahead, try it. The casual confidence in Sarah's voice was unnerving. She stood alone in a chamber filled with beings who could order the destruction of human civilization, and she showed no fear at all. You have seen what one human can do when you underestimate us. Do you really want to find out what billions of humans can do when they know you are coming? Dr. Kethvar pulled up data on his tablet, his scaled fingers moving rapidly across the display. Our projections show that human military technology is centuries behind our own capabilities. Their weapons are primitive, their ships are slow, and their numbers are insufficient to pose a real threat. Your projections were based on the assumption that we would not know about you until it was too late. Now we do know. We have years to prepare, and we have detailed intelligence about your capabilities. Do you think we will waste that time? Sarah began walking slowly around the chamber, her voice carrying clearly in the vast space. Humans are very good at two things, Council Leader. We are good at adapting, and we are good at destroying things that threaten us. You have given us both motivation and information. That was a mistake. Even with advance warning, your species lacks the technological base to mount an effective defense, Vexthul insisted, but there was less certainty in her voice than before. Really? Let me tell you what I learned about your technology while I was dismantling your facility. Your computers are faster than ours, but they rely heavily on automated systems. Your weapons are more powerful, but they have complex charging cycles. Your ships are larger, but they require massive support infrastructures. Sarah stopped walking and faced the High Council directly. You have built a civilization based on the assumption that superior technology guarantees victory. You have never faced an enemy that could adapt your own systems against you. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. The Zephyrians had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years through technological superiority and careful planning. They had never encountered a species that could match their adaptability. Your virus has corrupted our research data, Thysera observed, but it cannot cripple our entire civilization. No, but it can slow you down. And while you are rebuilding your databases and restoring your systems, humans will be preparing. We learn fast, Council Leader. Give us a few years with your technology specifications and we will surprise you. Vexthul stood slowly, her ancient form towering over the chamber. You speak confidently for someone who is still our prisoner, am I? Look around you. Your most advanced facility is destroyed. Your research program is crippled. Your invasion plans are compromised. And I am standing here alive, talking to your leadership as an equal rather than a test subject. Sarah gestured to the displays showing the ongoing damage across the collective. If I am your prisoner, then what does that make you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Zephyrians had captured what they thought was a primitive specimen. Instead, they had found themselves facing a declaration of war from a species they barely understood. What do you want? Vexthul asked finally. I want you to leave human space alone. Permanently. Find some other species to study, some other worlds to exploit. Stay away from Earth and our colonies. And if we refuse? Sarah's smile was cold as winter starlight. Then you will discover exactly how creative humans can be when our survival is at stake. You thought I was dangerous when I was alone and improvising with salvaged materials. Imagine what my species can accomplish when we have time to prepare and access to your technology. She paused, letting that sink in. You called this an experiment. I called it a proclamation of war. The choice of which one it becomes is now yours. Dr. Kethvar looked up from his tablet, his expression troubled. Council Leader, we are receiving reports from our monitoring stations. Several human colonies have begun transmitting on frequencies they have never used before. Their communication patterns suggest coordinated military preparation. How long since the data transmission? Vexthul asked. 73 hours, Sarah replied calmly. More than enough time for the information to reach Earth and for the Colonial Defense Force to begin implementing emergency protocols. The High Council exchanged glances filled with uncertainty. For the first time in thousands of years, the Zephyrian collective faced an enemy that had surprised them, an enemy that had turned their own confidence against them. We will consider your terms, Vexthul said finally. No, Sarah replied. You will accept them, because the alternative is a war against a species that you have seriously underestimated, a species that now knows everything about your capabilities and has had advance warning to prepare. She looked around the chamber one final time. You wanted to study humans to determine if we were suitable for integration. Congratulations. You have learned everything you need to know about my species. Sarah Chen had entered this chamber as a captive specimen. She was leaving as a representative of humanity, who had just delivered an ultimatum to one of the galaxy's oldest powers. The Zephyrians had called it an experiment. She had called it a proclamation of war. And now the entire galaxy would discover which description had been more accurate.